In the bio written about you, it talks about being robbed of your childhood. But I think a lot of us wonder, we know that you had a childhood prior to the presence of Hitler and the Nazis. So I'd like to start by just asking, what was it like to be 4 or 5-year-old Nate Taffel? What was your childhood like before you were robbed of part of it?
My childhood was very, very memorable. I grew up in a family with love. We were pretty well off because my parents were farmers. I had a very spoiled upbringing. Being the youngest in the family of 10 children, I do not forget one day my family. There are occasions, many that do pray, if I'm by myself, for my family. I attended as a young man the Hebrew school, and I also attended public school.
Ironically, you had a house that had extra rooms. You had a rabbi living with you.
Yeah.
But you went to school and you faced anti-Semitism as a young man. How come?
Well, it's very prevalent that we had anti-Semitism in Poland. I must also say there were a lot of Gentiles. They risked their lives, they lost their lives to hide Jews. So you can't say that everybody was anti-Semitic, but the environment was anti-Semitic in Poland because it had the largest Jewish community. Poland had 3 million Jews.
What was an example of anti-Semitism towards you at school?
Well, I can tell you today's anti-Semitism still in existence in Poland. I'm a Polish person, born in Poland. I'm an American citizen, but I'm Polish Jew. Take a Polish Christian who served at the same camps, presumably or possibly, and came back to Poland. He gets his property back, and he's back as a citizen and everything else. I took my family back to Poland. Not only did I not get back my property or my parents' property or so forth, but I wouldn't be let into a house which I own. So there is still anti-Semitism because I'm Jewish. And
as a child, though, were you just taunted with words, or what?
In childhood and school, you were constantly ridiculed as a Jew. Being 5, 6 years old, you ask your parents what Jew means, and they kind of said, ignore it, don't worry about it, because they tried to protect my age and that I wouldn't know the definition of anti-Semitism anyway. Right. But there were occasions, for instance, Easter, Christmas, where people came out from church and beat up Jews and broke windows in the houses and some different atrocities. We just kept on living the way.
And in the introduction, it talked about your bar mitzvah, a little different than what we do today. It was essentially your dad pronounced you bar mitzvah, and then 2 days later you left in a wagon. How long did that take you, and where did you go?
Well, I wasn't 13 years of age. Jewish people are bar mitzvah at 13. But the adults knew the atrocities that the Jews are not going to be in existence. And I was 12, about 12. And my father asked me to read some Jewish part of the Bible and said, you bar mitzvah. But in actuality, I did not reach 13. Or 2 days later, the Germans occupied.
All right, so you're in Radomish to escape. You were on a horse-drawn wagon, right?
Well, Radomish was a small town with a center in the city, and the war broke out in 1939. The Germans, we heard approaching, so we went in the basement, and my sister, my youngest one, my father and mother were hiding, but we heard the German Wehrmacht, which is the irregular army, approaching, and they had steel plated boots. You could hear him from quite a distance. So my father and I went upstairs, and my father said something to one of the soldiers, and he beat him up. Still very tragic to see your father get beaten up. And after a short period of time, they left, and the Gestapo and the SS took over the city. But knowingly that something was happening by the adults, that some tragedy is arriving. We lived for a while, we stayed in the city, but the Gestapo walked into every Jewish home and confiscated anything of any valuable furs, liquor, money, gold, or whatever you had, and they told them, if you not submit, you get killed. And naturally, they came to our house, they took everything of any value. And by that time, the SS people gathered in the center of the city. Amongst them were Ukrainians, Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians who joined the SS to eliminate Jews. The reason you knew the difference is because the Germans wore black uniforms. I got around the city more because the law said that every Jew over 13 years of age had to wear an armband with the Star of David, and I was not 13 years of age. And I remember Jewish Orthodox people, they got hold of the Germans, and they had facial hair, and they burned them, and they were screaming and for pain and everything, and they were beaten up. It was tragic, and I also saw there was a bunch of trucks that arrived in the city. One particular truck had a glass window in the back, and I could not figure out why would a truck have a glass window in the back. But I asked, nobody could answer that question. On that day, things were very subdued. My parents and some other people who came from Jews from different parts of Europe to Poland, they were huddling during the day and talking, and they would not allow me to listen in because of my age. But that particular night, about midnight, a gentleman with a horse and wagon arrived in the house, and we got on the horse and wagon, and we left to a city called Tarnow, which was a short distance away from Radomish. And my sister, my nephew, and my brother-in-law lived in the ghetto.
And to be a ghetto, what did that mean? That there were soldiers around the
The
clock?
ghetto is an area where only Jews live, surrounded by SS, and couldn't get in or out. And their existence for living was extended more than ours in Radomish.
When you got to the Tarnow Ghetto, what happened? What was life like there?
Well, we came into Tarnow Ghetto, and we went into my brother-in-law and sister's place, and we stayed there for a while. My brother-in-law somehow got in touch with my sisters who left behind, and they communicated, and that was for a period of time. This gentleman who brought us communication from my sisters huddled with my brother-in-law, and when he was finished, he came to my sister and I and told us to put on coats, and we go on a trip, and we can't talk, cough, sneeze, or nothing. We have to be extremely quiet. And it breaks my heart to remember the sadness when I saw my mother and father and my sister in a bedroom with the door a bit open, and I never could say goodbye. There was nothing said except sadness. We were taken, the two of us, on a truck and covered from head to toe with canvas, And we went through the gates of the ghetto, and the Gestapo stopped the truck and asked him if he had anything. And he says, no.
You were how old here? 12?
12.
And she was how old?
My sister must have been 14, 13, 14.
And I'm sorry, her name is what?
Feige.
So you guys are together in this truck. Is it just you or is there other people?
Just us. So we went on the journey. We arrived in a camp called Smochka. Smochka was a camp that repaired and constructed roads for the German army. And when we arrived there, we found out that my sisters, 3 sisters, were there from Radomish. And we asked them what happened, and they said Radomish was eliminated. And I asked what happened to my brother. They didn't know. After a while, a few days later, the Gestapo came in and picked out people because the camp was situated in a forest. So they came and picked up people that weren't capable of working or disliked for any reason or other. And they took him in the forest and shot him. On one occasion they came in. By that time I was working loading sand for the roads and doing other work. They came in and they told everybody to line up, and they picked me to be shot. My foreman came over and told them, let him go, he's a good worker. And they let me go, and I survived that part.
Well, this is going on. Are you praying at this point? Are you thinking about God and protection from above at all?
Not really. I can't say I did. I don't know, of my age, maybe I didn't understand the consequences. I couldn't imagine a situation like that could arise. So, for a young person, I just couldn't comprehend anything like this, what the consequences are.
And did you know anyone? Did you have any friends who also were there building roads with you?
Yeah, there were some other Jews there already in that camp, including my sister from Radomish that they brought out. And they told me my brother was left behind in Radomish. And I worked there for 1 year. Our food consisted of bread and margarine twice a day. And during the day, in the middle of the day, we received soup. And we had no facilities to wash or clean or change clothes or anything. At one particular day, one of the German soldiers was riding a horse, and the horse broke a leg, and they shot him. And they gave us the horse meat, and that's the only time during the course of a year that we hadn't had any meat from the horse. After a while, they announced that the roads and everything is completed, and they told us all together in the center of the camp, and they put us on trucks and took us to a place called Mielec. Mielec was very far away. Prior to the war, Mielec was trying to build airplanes by the Polish government before the war, but they were succeeded. But when the Germans came into Poland, they tried to put up barracks for that purpose, I suppose. And when we arrived in Mielec, they told us to line up. And there was an assessment sitting on a chair, and he had a wooden stick and a nail in it and cotton around it. And he dipped it in the ink and told us to put the hand out and hold it back, and tattooed us with KL. KL stands for Konzentrationslager or concentration camp in English. My hand and some other people's hands swelled because it's very deep. You can't eliminate it. It's under the skin.
Do you recall at that time what you expected was going to happen to you? I mean, for most of us, we can't imagine any of this happening to us in our daily toil. Here you are doing it, living it as a young boy. What were you thinking was your future?
I didn't know really if I can recollect it, but there was a lot of sadness. And you could see everybody's face was sad, and the adults were saying, today is a Jewish holiday, which nobody, they treated us like sheep, like lambs, like animals. They took away the thinking from the Jewish people in the camps. And while I was in Mielec, my sisters were separated from me, but I got hold of them, and they told me later that my brother is in a camp in the Mielec with us. So I got in touch with him, so he told me that the Germans selected young men, and they put him in a hall, and he stayed there for a while. And I remember now that I brought this out, I went on a bike to talk to him, and the Gestapo with leather coats went and they saw me, and they yelled out, "Stop!" And they took the gun out to shoot me, but my brother in the window saw it and came out, begged them, let him go, and I survived. But then he told me what happened to him and the other young man that they picked out. Their purpose was to dig graves, and they dug graves. And after a while, they brought in trucks mothers with tiny little babies. And they took the little babies and they hit them in the heads against the wall and killed them. The mothers got frantic and they screamed and cried and everything. They told them to line up in front of the grave, and they shot them in the back of the head, and they fell in. And on some weren't even dead, he said, and they buried them. After that, they had another grave, and at that truck that I specifically asked him what it was, he told me the truck took a bunch of people, Jews, that were disabled or not capable of walking or sick or whatever, and they put them in the truck, lined them up or dropped them in, whatever the case, I don't know. And they hooked up the exhaust system and they poisoned them. And they brought him out to be buried there. And after that, when he was done, he put him to Mielec and he worked there at the airplane place. And we eventually had to line up, and there was engineers that picked out the young people, all the people, whoever they liked, to work on the different places. I worked at the transport department. As a young guy, I had an opportunity to clean offices, German offices, and I found different kind of scraps of food in the garbage. And I asked for permission to take it, and they said, go. They shook their head, they'd go, take it. And I shared it with my brother, because we didn't get much to eat at all.
I want to ask you a question, because what you just described is horrific. Horrific, the babies being killed, the mothers. For most of us, I think we witnessed that once, let alone repeatedly. We'd break. And somehow you didn't break. You kept a semblance about you. How do you explain that?
That's where it comes in. I miss my young days. My upbringing from 12 to 17 and a half was completely non-existent. Not thinking, not knowing what the future brings. So I just kept from one day to another. Well, if you ask a young 12-year-old child or 13-year-old child, it's a different attitude that you have when you're 20 or 19 or 20 or 21. I don't know if I was different or what, I don't know. I shut a lot of things out. After working in Mielec for 1 year, they told all Jewish men, not women, not girls, to get in the center of the camp and put us on trucks and took us to a place called Wieliczka. Wieliczka was very close place to Auschwitz. And when we arrived in Wieliczka, rumors had it, supposedly, that there were so many trucks, railroad trucks with Jewish people to be killed or gassed in Auschwitz, which was very close, that we had to take the turn and wait. But in the meantime, they decided that we are capable of repairing planes, and there was a concentration camp in Germany, in Flossenburg, which was in existence before we arrived there for German political prisoners and homosexuals, which Hitler put in. They put up barracks, and they took us over there. And when we took us over there, my brother and I were sent to Flossenburg. And we arrived in Flossenburg with the other Jewish people. The engineers came and picked out people they wanted to work for. I was picked up to work and construct different part of shut down parts of airplanes, and I worked with an engineer doing odd things and go and get parts and messages and so forth. On one occasion, I remember I went to get some parts, which I was ordered to go and get in a different department, and the foreman saw me and put me on a pedestal and gave me 27 lashes on my back for no question asked. And it hurt, and I cried, and I came and I sat down. And the engineer asked me what happened. I told him. He just shrugged his head. I worked there very diligently. We had to get up in the morning when the lights came on, and we had to go to sleep when the lights went off. Our sleeping facilities were straw mattresses and straw pillows and a blanket. For 1 year, we had striped uniforms, wooden shoes, and a shirt and a cap. We never had an opportunity to wash or clean. Our facilities for bathroom were just a wooden plank. We were extremely lousy. We had so many lice, I can't remember ever sitting without scratching my head. The lice were so bad.
Were you healthy throughout all this? You haven't talked to me the first time we spoke or now, but ever having a cold or the flu or being sick, and yet you would think somehow you'd break?
If I did, I had no choice, because nobody would listen and do anything. I give you, in Mielec, I developed a toothache, and it was excruciating. And I looked for a Jewish dentist, and I found one, and he said, yeah, you got a bad tooth, and I also had infection here, which is a sign. I developed a swollen part here, I don't know, for an abscess or what. I asked him if he could do anything. He says, I'd have no tools or nothing, but he found somebody who had a pair of pliers, and he pulled my tooth. And, thinking today, after adulthood, how much pain you can endure if no choice. In Flossenburg, our food was consistent with bread and margarine, soup one day in the lunchtime. I had an occasion one time to sit with an acquaintance and having soup, and while he was eating, he fished out a human finger. And I was wondering if he's going to eat it or not, and I just turned my head, and I don't know if he ate it or not. Life in Flossenburg, people were dying from starvation. The crematoriums couldn't keep up. I slept in a bunk bed. There was a dead man for days, brown, but they constructed big fire places outside the barracks, and they threw the dead people on top of it and burned them there. They didn't get to him for quite a few days. On one occasion, 4 Jewish people decided to escape. They dug on the barbed wire and the electric fence, and they got across, and the SS people on the tower saw him, and they shot him. For a penalty, they went to that barrack and took 10 people out, and they hung him, but we had to all stand and watch him doing it.
Did you have any idea beyond Flushingburg what was going on with the whole war and all the other camps?
No, we didn't know. We didn't know about anything. Nobody knew anything. We didn't know from one day to another. Maybe the adults might have realized, maybe. Every day was the same day.
Every day was the same day.
Every day was the same day. They come, and one occasion, they come and deloused us, what they called. They took us to a place to take showers, and the water was cold. And we tried to avoid the cold water, and if you did, you got beaten up, so you had to go back. I mean, this is unbelievable when I think of it today, how they treat people, or they treated people. And mind you, it was different nationalities that participated doing it. And one day they decided that all men line up in the center of the camp, and they put us in cattle trucks, and they took us for a journey unknown to us. We were proceeding, but the American Air Force saw the trains and the SS guards. They shot at the train, the locomotives, and disabled them. So we couldn't proceed. So they brought another locomotive, and the same situation arose. So finally they decided that everybody get off the train, and they took us on a march. And we were marching, and it was in April, it was raining, it was cold. And people with their wooden shoes developed blisters. My brother had very bad blisters, and I dragged him to go to the front because anybody dropped back to the end and couldn't walk, they shot him and put him under empty wagons. They didn't leave him on the street. And there was a lot of shooting, and I begged my brother to keep going, and we kept on going. So we arrived in the forest. And we arrived in the forest, and they told us to line up. We all lined up with the purpose of being shot. But the German officer from the regular army with one arm, as I remember, stopped and called the SS people together and huddled with them. And all of a sudden, they disappeared. And we stood there in awe for a while, not to know what to do. But we saw a pig farm very short distance away. So my brother and I, we walked up there, and we saw some food in the trough, pig food, and started eating it because we were starved. And the German lady in the house saw us doing it, and she threw some bread at us, and we ate that. We went on a haymow after that, and we slept overnight. The next morning we found out that within a very short distance, the Americans were there. So we walked, and we arrived and met the American soldiers, but we couldn't communicate. We asked Jewish in Yiddish, or in German or Polish, but they couldn't understand us, and we couldn't understand them. So finally, somebody knew Yiddish or Jewish. He found a guy, American Jew, who spoke Yiddish. He talked to us, and we communicated with me, and we spoke. He gave me a pair of pants and a shirt and some other clothes. He also gave me a can of jam. He opened it, and I started devouring because I never had any sweets in 4.5 years that I was in labor camp. So I was eating and devouring. He says, "You're going to get sick. You're going to get crunk. You're going to get sick." Yeah. So I said, no, he took it. He didn't want me to eat it and get sick. And later on, he gave it to me.
Did part of what he tell you is the war was over?
No, they were still going towards the Czechoslovakian border. So they left a few days, maybe later, I don't remember. And we found a place to stay. It was empty, and we stayed there for a few days or weeks. I don't remember exactly. And all we did is eat and eat. And For me, it was very difficult because I wanted to find out what a young person is doing at that age. And I was very inquisitive. I tried to, learn. And when the Germans came in, they did not allow Jewish children to go to public school. So I didn't have too much education or information. So I wanted to learn as much as possible while I was there. Then we found out there was a city called Schrandorf, and there were some Holocaust survivors there in a big hall. And we joined them. We walked over, we joined them. And the UNRWA, an American organization, provided us with food. And the Joint gave us some clothes. And we stayed there. We ate it. And after a while, we decided that we should find a place to stay on our own. And there was a German lady, a widow, that needed somebody to cut wood to heat the house. So I volunteered with my brother. She let us stay in the house. We stayed there for a while. I remember I cut part of my finger off cutting wood. My brother heard that there's some other Jewish survivors going back to Poland to search families. So he decided he went back and went to the city of Radomeš, and he went into the house. The house was completely empty. He slept on the floor, but the natives were knocking on the doors and the windows and tried not to let him sleep or do anything. And he did that for a few days. And while he was gone, I had tremendous yearnings to get a gun and go out and shoot those people that killed my family. I couldn't stand it. I lived with hate day and night. It bothered me. How can I get even? How can I go out and get revenge? So something came up to me. He said, Nate, if you keep on hating like you do, it'll destroy you. Like all other haters get destroyed. Hate destroys people. So I said from there on, I will not hate, but I'll never forget or forgive.
I'm sorry, this idea came to you or someone said this to you?
It came from heaven.
Okay. And you immediately accepted this?
I accepted the version.
Wow.
And I never hate.
I want to ask you about that, but I want to go back something first, because I remember, especially being the age of our students here today, when I was in youth group and we would study the Holocaust, inevitably, because we were kids and we would think, well, you'd fight back. Why would you just allow this to happen? Why were you not able in the camp, the healthier, younger Jews, to somehow band together and fight back? You talked about those who tried to escape and got shot, and then they hung others to sort of intimidate you and tell you. But was there discussion of revolt, or was it just not?
No. There was silence. There was no really, maybe because of my age, the older ones wouldn't communicate. But basically, when you watch the adults, there was silence. There wasn't very much talking going on. My biggest thing when I speak in high schools is I say to the kids, the most important people in your life is your family. And the next ones are your teachers. I miss them greatly. And when you get older, you will miss them because you can't replace them. The more education you obtain in your life, the more doors are open for you. So take advantage and learn as much as possible. I miss it greatly. After living in Schwandorf for a period of time, a Jewish organization called ORIT told us that we can pick places to learn professions because we didn't have any, or I didn't have any. I learned to be a steel molder. After completing that, I heard that there were a lot of Jewish people leaving from the city and going to Palestine. The English people had the dominion over Palestine. They wouldn't let them in, so they wound up in Cyprus. I was thinking maybe to do that, but then on the other hand, I says, why? Why would I want to go there for what? So then, after a while, the Australian government announced that if you sign a contract for 2 years, you get a trip to go to Australia, and 10% of the people will be only allowed Jews. I was selected to go. We went to a place, Stuttgart, and we gathered over there. And from there, we went to Geneva, Italy, on the boat. And on the boat, there were about 900 and some people, and there were 10 Jews. And most of the people were SS people, Nazis, that the Australians took him with open arms because they were so desperate for population. So they took anybody or anybody.
So in your post-war freedom, you traveled to Australia by boat with SS officers.
Right.
And at this point now, you're not enemies exactly. You are both trying to seek a better life somewhere far away. Why would you choose Australia as acceptable when Cyprus wasn't?
I wanted to go away from Europe as far as possible. I called it the God-forsaken land. I wanted to get away from the Europeans, and I asked people, not knowing, where can you go? There's no civilization, and you're very far away. And they said, go to Australia, and that's where I went.
That's far away. How long was that trip, do you remember?
31 days.
So you went to Australia, and you were a Polish citizen. You became an Australian citizen, right? How long did you stay there?
When I was picked to work in the Australian Army as a cook, I started receiving letters from my brother-in-law from Chicago and let me know what's happening. He said my sister and his son were killed in Treblinka, gassed. My father and mother were shot in Tarnow Ghetto, that he knew. He was sent to a camp, and he kept corresponding with me and kept me up. He said, did you know you had a brother in Argentina? I says, no. Well, he left about 2 years before I was born, and he found the address somehow, and I started communicating with my brother in Argentina. He was destitute, so I made $7 a week, and I sent him half of it or more in every letter that I sent him. And I kept in touch with him for quite a while. After I finished that 2-year contract, I got a job working at the Christian Brother College in Sydney. As a cook, I worked there, and then I received a letter that my brother left for the United States. He got married and has a child. And during the course of time, he developed mental problems. He couldn't sleep at night with these memories. He woke up at the SS chasing him and so forth. And he started insisting I should come and be with him. And he lived in Racine. I figured it's my obligation to be with my family, and applied to the American consul for a visa, and it took 5 years for me to get a visa. I came to the United States, and I stayed in Racine for a while. My brother was sick. We moved to the city of Milwaukee, and I found some other survivors there. And one Jewish lady wanted me to get married the worst way. She fixed me up with my wife. I married my wife, and I have 2 sons and a daughter who is right here. Mindy, stand up, please. I think my wife too. I don't want to discriminate you. Come on.
This is sort of our lightning round. I've got a bunch of questions from the audience. I want to ask a couple of them. And I was going to ask you, this is a question I wondered too. You're on the boat for 31 days with SS officers, and the question is, how did they treat you on the boat?
We stayed away.
You just stayed away from each other?
The 10 people stayed together, and we stayed away with them.
At what point did you start to decide to share your testimony, and why?
there was a lady that was in charge of the Holocaust, Sandy Hoffman, and she called me, and she was a survivor's daughter, that most of the people are getting feeble, they can't communicate very well, and since I'm one of the youngest survivors, would I consider speaking? And automatically I said yes, and I haven't stopped since then. And it's been at least 10 years, and I spoke to over 30,000 people since then.
How does viewing those atrocities in the Holocaust affect your religious faith then and now?
My religious faith is all the religious practices that I realized had been written by men, for men, by people. I believe in God, I believe in the hereafter, and that's my greatest belief, is in God. And by doing that, I lived a very ethical life. I didn't commit any criminal or any bad activities. I brought up my children. They all went to college. I worked day and night to create for them facilities to have all the education they want. My life, I hate to die and upset my children. I have the most gorgeous children in the world. My life without them would be worthless. I don't know if I would be here.
You've kind of addressed this, but how were you able to cope with the sadness, the anger and anxiety under the conditions that you suffered for the 4.5 years during the camp?
I don't allow him to overtake me. I fight him, and I try to change the thinking of different subjects. I have tremendous amount of people who are of various religion and does not take any effect whatsoever what religion they are, their friends. This country is the greatest country in the world. This country, people are dying to come here. This country fights war to give people liberty, freedom, democracy. My second greatest love is the state of Israel. Because the state of Israel, no Jews will go to crematorium without a fight. God bless both countries. Thank you.